Well, this is the start of a new era in my moth trapping adventures. A new site, which the gentleman who owns this former Nottinghamshire Hospital has been wanting me to come to for a number of years. In fact, Dillis and I did come here and have a couple of wanders around a number of years ago, and this is the first night's moth trapping here, and I'm quite excited actually to be trapping in a site like this, and only a mile or so outside from the centre of Mansfield, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what moths this site has to offer. In case you're wondering, this is the former Ransom Hospital just outside Mansfield, and as it's getting dark now, in what is a beautiful setting, there should be a good species list available here, and hopefully we'll be on our way to securing a number of species this evening. So as darkness descends, it's time to kick the trap into life. Well, we're up and running. There's a little bit of drizzle starts to come down as soon as I fired up the light. Remarkable that. Hopefully we won't get too much. There's a chance of a little bit of drizzle, and we'll see. I think I might need a couple of stones to keep the sheet weighted down, so that will be job number one. There's the first moth at the start of what is a quiet session at the moment, but we have had about quarter of an hour, 20 minutes of heavy drizzle, which hasn't really helped, but hopefully moths will start to come in now, although it is still spitting with rain. But this is a beautifully marked map-winged swift, and this one actually shows how the moth derives its name, much more beautifully and intricately marked in various shades and patches of browns and odd white spots and other odd-shaped markings in white. It's a beautiful marked moth. You may have seen the video from Miss and Carr a few weeks ago, and I featured this species, but I featured the form, which I seem to think is called Gallica offhand, and that's just basically plain brown, just a hint of the markings that you can see here. And the only really distinctive mark on that particular moth was a white spot towards the tip of the forewings. This is your more typically marked map-winged swift. It's a beautiful moth, lovely moth. In Nottinghamshire, it's most common in the Sherwood Forest area, so it's no real surprise to see this moth come in. So that's the first decent moth of the session. Hopefully it'll continue dry. Well, as I mentioned while talking about the map-winged swift, it's a rather quiet half an hour opening to the moth trapping session here at Ransom Wood. very few moths appear to be on the wing. Even grass veneers are very quiet and reluctant to appear at the moment. All will change, no doubt, as the sky continues to darken and more moths become active. I think we'll get a decent number of species tonight. I'm not expecting a big trap list this evening, but we'll just see how it goes. Always nice to trap somewhere new though, really nice. So it'd be nice to see what this site reveals in the fullness of time, and during the couple of hours at least I'll be here this evening. It's a case of playing it by ear, seeing how it goes, and if it warrants stopping, then I will stop. But at least the rain has stopped. Well, here's a very attractive moth which has just dropped in. Not a species I catch very regularly. It is an annual visitor to the trap wherever a trap, and this is a green silver lines. Most of you who watch this channel regularly will know I do love a green moth, and this is a real beauty and very appropriately named as well, with those almost whitish lines running diagonally across the forewings. It's a widespread species, but this is a moth that I'll probably catch maybe once or twice a year at home, but it will occur in suburban gardens. It's a lovely thing, especially as the antennae are like a salmon pink colour. A beautiful moth, and the moths are indeed starting to come in slowly but surely now. So that's green silver lines. Well, that's a view looking away from the light. It's an impressive and really nice building, the old Ransom Hospital. Very nice indeed. And it's nice that we've actually got more moths coming in now. It's just gone 11:15, so been here running the trap for an hour and a quarter, and it's quite a decent species list. We're on about 35-36 species at the moment, and that's really increased in the last half hour. Nothing overly exciting as yet, but you never know just what's going to drop in. That's one of the big attractions personally for me in moth trapping. You can never guarantee what you're going to get. Well, there's another moth in this pot that I don't trap all that regular, but this is a bordered white. It's a species that you'll often get in large numbers, flying during the day occasionally around areas of pine trees. So in some of the old coniferous plantations that we have in Nottinghamshire, this moth can be quite common flying around the tops of trees, but it will turn up well away from pines. It never settles with its wings open and is always reluctant to settle, at least for a photo. But I have got some photos, and I'll drop a photo in here because it is a beautiful species, it really is. And it's a shame in a way that it doesn't sit with its wings open, because it's very attractive from above. But that's bordered white. There's another moth here, again another one which is always reluctant to settle with its wings open, but this is a buff arches in here, and again photo time. It's an absolutely beautiful moth, and it's quite unusual because there's areas on the forewings of this which are completely absent of any scales, but it's a beautiful thing, it really is. Another one of those species that could attract people into the world of mothing and moth trapping. It's a lovely thing, but it never settles, so it's rare for me to get any footage. And if you go to even photograph it, it's one of those moths that even if you have it in the fridge overnight, it's very quick to become active. But it looks on the sheet now as though there is a nice moth that I can film. Well, this is another of those moths which has done well in Nottinghamshire in the last 10-20 years. And 20 years ago you couldn't get this moth in Nottinghamshire, but it's moved into the county and has colonised and has spread the length and breadth of the county now, and this is a particularly attractive example This is one of those species in which most individuals are different from one another, and this of course is a moth called the coronet. It's a beautiful thing, huge range in background coloration and markings, and this is a really nice example. It's a moth that has done really well. First appeared at home for me a few years ago after never being seen, but it's now more than annual visitor to the garden, and it will occur in suburban gardens and even in urban areas. It's by no means confined to rural sites. In fact, it's probably commoner in gardens than it is in sites like Sherwood Forest. You probably wouldn't get this if I was trapping there now. So this is a coronet, and it's another beautiful moth. Well, this is bordered white. This is the moth that I was showing you in the pot, and chances are it's going to get smashed out of the way shortly by one of these many moths that are coming in. That's a fanfoot that's just landed behind it, but you can see how attractive this moth is, and it's just a shame that unless you kill it and pin it and open the wings up, you rarely see any glimpse of the upper side, because they're very attractively marked with like blotches of white on this sort of brownish ground colour, but underneath still a very attractive moth. So that's bordered white, and we've done well that it's not been knocked out of the way. An increasing number of moths coming in. In fact, there is a pine hawk moth knocking about somewhere, but all of a sudden things have picked up. So that's bordered white. It's a beautiful thing. Lovely, isn't it? Yeah, I know it won't be long. The more I talked about it, sooner or later it'll get knocked out of the way. Well, here's a very quick view of the male pine hawk moth which has come in. It may well settle, but we might have to do with that, which is good enough really. Although it's just generally a rather dull and grey moth, it's impressive by its large size, and the only real discernible markings are those 3 sort of short dashes on each of the forewings. When fresh, it really is a beautiful moth despite its rather drab coloration. On the side of the abdomen there's almost a hint of some sort of whitish or lighter grey markings, but with the pine hawk moth, this is what you get. And this is another moth with a fairly recent history in the county. I remember in the 1980s the county recorder catching one of these, and it made the local evening paper. Since then it's increased and become widespread, especially in forested areas. So in the Sherwood Forest area and all the way between sort of Mansfield and Nottingham, this moth is fairly common. It will turn up well away from pine trees, being a hawk moth, very powerful flyer. I finally had it, I think it was last year in the garden, it might have been the year before now, after many years, what seemed like many years waiting for one to finally turn up. So the first hawk moth of the evening, and it's settled down quite nicely. Trouble is, I've got to unsettle it now so I can carry on and write it down. But the largest moth of the night so far. Always nice to get a hawk moth. Hopefully we'll get a few more as the session continues, and you will get an idea in the background the number of moths that there are now coming in to the light. So that's pine hawk moth. Well, we're getting late into the session now. Good numbers of species, had approaching 70 species. Nothing exciting, nothing particularly colourful, but I'm going to have one more look around the sheet in a minute. The breeze has picked up, you may well be able to hear it on the microphone, and that's just taking the edge off the temperature a little bit, and it keeps blowing the sheet a bit. But we've had a good selection of moths. After the first hour I didn't think we'd end up with the species that we've had, and what I'll do in a minute I'll go around and say just have a look, see if there's any species that I haven't featured before on this channel. But I've been very pleased with what's come in tonight. Very pleased indeed. This is a site with the potential for a good range of moths. Well, here's one of my favourite moths, and this is a pebble hook tip. Again, another example of a moth that is well named by the shape of the forewings and that really hooked shape. Common enough, it has 2 broods a year, pebble hook tip, and it will occur in urban gardens or suburban gardens. It's a nice species and one of a number of moths that have similar shaped wings, although not all to the degree of curved nature that this species has. This is the only one that's turned up tonight. I thought there might well be a few more, but it's beautifully coloured and patterned, although the basic ground colour is an almost straw to light brown tan colour. It really is beautifully marked. It's got the 2 central, or the central dot look, which is almost like a bluish grey, and then you have that sort of reddish darker brown line that arcs along both forewings. It's a lovely thing, and that's pebble hook tip. And here's a species that's fast becoming an old favourite on this channel, and this of course is the peppered moth. At one time, in the days of heavier pollution and in industrial areas, you would get a form of this moth, a melanic form, in which it was virtually completely black, and that seems to have largely died out now. Rare that you'll get any other variation other than the one that you can see in front. It's a lovely moth. The females usually much larger than the males, and this is one of several that's come in this evening. So that's peppered moth. Always nice to see. I do like peppered moths. Well, it's later than what I was expecting it to be when I've just looked at the watch. It's 1:20 in the morning, and it's time for a steady pack up. But I've enjoyed this session. Always nice to trap somewhere different, somewhere that's definitely safe and secure. There's no account there. In fact, I've just been visited and spent half an hour talking to the security guard who's on duty overnight. Turns out he's a nature lover too, and this site has a lot to offer in the coming weeks and months as a bat makes a slight descent to try and nab all of the moths. But a decent catch. Nice to get well over 60 species in just over 3 hours. 3 hours and a quarter. So that's it from this first visit to Ransom Hospital. The first of hopefully many visits over the coming years. It's all right. I'm hoping to catch a ghost. An old hospital like that has to have a ghost.